Yeah, I can drink 2 monsters in a day. What about it?
I like how you say that as if it's a lot.
Actually, it's down from what I was drinking. I was drinking like 3. It was pretty bad
I'll
actually.
have like 5 coffees in a day,
No,
casually.
you don't understand. Like this stuff rots in the ground. Like it's like salting Carthage whenever you pour this stuff on something. It is not healthy. All right, it's like
I don't. It, and you know what? Monster still tastes better than Red Bull.
you're absolutely right.
I mean, on the other hand, what does that mean? Red Bull is one of the most disgusting drinks ever created.
It was the first energy drink I had. By the end of it, I was like upside down in my school chair, and they're like, "Ben, what are you up to? I've never had an energy drink before." Oh, but no, like honestly, the meme I made with the no crits Gaius boosted waterfall, it was hilarious. Vince Davidson was an Italian. No, he was Irish. He was Irish. Excuse me. And he was very angry, and he and I knew how to push. I knew how to push his buttons, uh, as I do most people. So he he would just get so mad at me because I had some brass balls with this game. I knew exactly what'll happen. I'm like, Vince, you should wait until I have 3 damage so you can guarantee the kill. I don't have enough guard for it. And he's like, no, I'm going to do it now. I'm like, okay, I'm going to get the crit. I'm like, okay, but you're not going to get the crit. Screw you, man. Come on, Vince. I'm only at 2 damage, no guard. What?
I'm confused.
It's Card Fight Vanguard. Actually, the first season of the anime, like, was pretty good. Like, he had like friends and
Nani?
betrayals. Like, yeah, I
I'm
was.
sorry, I'm just looking at that scene. I'm thinking,
Wait, are we live now?
Nani?
Oh, looks like we're live now. Huh. Well,
Amazing.
I don't know where the
What a
chat is.
start.
There it is. Live chat. Why can't I see live chat? I want to see live chat.
Let me see if I can pull it up.
Okay, yeah. I just need to up the sound a bit. You gonna be my moderator? You gonna watch the live chat for me? You gonna tell me to ban people? Where do I even find the live chat in this thing?
No.
Yeah, that's fair. No, it's not made for kids. That's how I roll. Don't restrict. We're going to be talking about My Hero Academia in a little bit. We're just waiting for our friend to get on,
Hello,
I guess.
Mega Buster Shepard.
Hey, it's Mega Buster Shepard, my man. Mau Mau. But where's the live chat in this thing? What did I do different?
Hello, Aaron.
Hey. What up?
Look, there's 2 of our regular viewers
And we love
out of
both
our
of them.
4.
Yeah, I didn't
Out
eat.
of our like 4.
Right? And we love each and every one of them. But no.
We do.
So I guess I guess we'll start talking about it. I guess our guest.
Caroline, are you here?
Yeah, I think I gotcha. Maybe?
Yes, yeah, we can hear you.
Hey.
All right. So, heroism and the Monster Hunter in the My Hero Academia world. We're big fans. We think it's probably one of the best anime that manga that's been put out for quite some time. Actually, no, it's incredibly workmanlike. It hits all its beats. It hits its narratives. It just hits, and that's important. Like, you can talk about art all you want, but like, no one's gonna be One Piece except for apparently Demon Slayer. Just Demon Slayer. Holy cow!
Yeah.
But
Yeah, that's actually wrong. So for people, for the you'll never be One Piece people. So, Eye Patch Wolf just put out his yearly State of Shonen Jump post, which is always an interesting watch. But this year, apparently, what blew my mind was that Demon Slayer did not just beat One Piece, which it was kind of threatening to do. Uh, so they not only beat One Piece, they absolutely crushed One Piece. I think the numbers that Wolf gave, they were seriously some of the craziest things I've ever heard. I think he said it sold 80,000 volumes or something over the past year, and which doesn't really mean much if you don't know the numbers. So he also said this. He goes, to put this into perspective, that would mean that the big three of Shonen Jump in their prime, One Piece, Naruto, and Bleach, were selling half that number combined. So, Demon Slayer did not just beat One Piece, it did not just win that battle, it absolutely crushed every manga ever by a mile, which is mind-blowing to me. I mean, I think that it's pretty good, but
It is.
I didn't think it was that good. So, let's see. Volume is low, even with my laptop cranked all the way up. Well, you know what? You can't blame my rig this time. I got a microphone and a headset and everything. It should be working.
So that it's pretty amusing, and like My Hero Academia was actually lower than I thought it would be, especially with the My Villain Academia arc wrapping up.
Well, that was the other thing that was mind-blowing. My Hero Academia gained readers and dropped in the ranking. Like, don't get me wrong, it dropped from like 6th to 7th or something. I mean, it's doing perfectly fine. You know, it's not like it's in a lull or anything like that. But I mean, the fact that it was able to gain readers but drop in the ranking just goes to show you how much the Demon Slayer effect has kind of changed things at Shonen Jump.
Absolutely. And honestly, I'm thinking like there's a lot of like questions going into the future. A lot of long runners are gone. There's some really great ones running around. Chainsaw Man, Spy X Family, Sakamoto Days is pretty funny. But it's
I have to say, I tried out Spy Family, or Spy X Family, or possibly Spix Family, based on just, by spelling. Anyway, based on iPatchWolf's recommendation of it, and I actually was surprised at how good Spy Family was. Like, it's really funny.
Do you have any favorites running around, Caroline?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
It's all right. Do you have any favorites running around? Shonen Jump wise? Or just manga wise? Am I still cutting out?
Caroline.
Yeah? I think yeah, I still keep having trouble with everybody cutting in and out. I'm not sure why.
Okay, maybe you can hear me better, because the question asked is, do you have any current favorite...
I think I'm gonna drop out for a few minutes and then try and come back and see how that works.
Alright, sounds good. Don't worry, we could definitely keep up the conversation for forever if it's a My Hero Academia
I'll be
combo.
back.
Good luck.
So if I can, I'm looking at Aaron VT in our live chat to mention the Demon Slayer movie. I am going to try and watch that in theaters if at all possible, though I don't know if it will be possible, thanks to the cough heard around the world. But if possible, I would like to see the Demon Slayer movie in theaters. But anyway, yeah. So Spy Family is really only notable, along with Sakamoto Days for that matter, because neither of them have an anime yet. And I am not the sort of person who deep dives into Shonen Jump, so I would not have tried it without eye patch wolf's little thing on it and recommendation, and I was impressed with Spy Family. I thought it would be weirder than it was, I guess, if that makes sense, in a bad way. Like it would have a more Japanese sense of humor, which I normally don't find very funny. But no, the sense of humor of Spy Family is extremely dry, which is like right up my alley. Uh, and just a lot of the jokes were landing really hard, especially the psychic little girl in the family. The telepathic little girl Anya is actually a riot, and the whole dynamic is so absolutely absurd. It just automatically gets laughs. So, have you read Spy Family at all?
I have not.
So, I Catch Wolf mentioned it, but the premise is that he's a spy named Twilight for some fictional, I guess, East European country. It seems like it's on a fictional Earth, with fictional countries that are kind of loosely mapped to ours, but some fictional country, and he is tasked with befriend. I think he needs to befriend the head of the, I don't know, some guy in the Interior Ministry or something, because they're trying to get the Prime Minister assassinated. That's not important. The important part is that in order to do this, he needs to have a daughter and a wife, because the daughter needs to get enrolled in the same daycare as the son of the person he's trying to get in with. So he adopts a little girl and gets into like a sham marriage with somebody. But the little girl he adopts is telepathic, so she can read minds, but he doesn't know that. And the woman that he fake marries is secretly an assassin, and he doesn't know that. So she doesn't know that he is a spy. He doesn't know that she's an assassin, and neither of them know that the daughter is a telepath.
Which is pretty funny. Like,
Which is all really funny. So the whole thing is absolutely absurd, but honestly kind of ingenious.
Mm-hmm.
And I have been thoroughly enjoying it. The thing about Spy Family, though, that I will say, I think it's exactly what most people think it is based on the description that I just gave. Like, it's not going to blow you out of the water. The artwork is fine. It is perfectly okay. There's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing particularly great about it.
Mm-hmm.
The writing, as far as like the plots go, he has them centered around like different missions. We need to get her to pass the test to get into the daycare. We need to pass the interview. Her brother is coming over to visit. Oh, and also to add another layer here to this, her brother is a member of the secret police of the country, except that the wife's brother, the assassin wife, except that she doesn't know that, and he doesn't know that she's an assassin. So there's just like all of these levels of nobody knows everything that's going on, except for the little girl who's a telepath, and she doesn't tell them that she knows.
Right. Like, what would you say? Well, I saw Mommy wrestling with Santa Claus, and then she cut Santa Claus's throat. What? Yeah.
So the last chapter I read was just this amazing chapter where the brother comes to visit them for the first time, and like they imply that the brother and her have some sort of weird, like, pseudo incestual relationship, but for once it actually works and it's really funny. Like, they mention that he's like absolutely obsessed with his sister, and she says, "Don't worry, I know exactly what to say to fool him. You just have to follow my lead." So he shows up, and then she's like, "All right, so the reason I didn't tell you I was married is that I forgot." And then he's like, "That's your explanation?" He goes, "But you saw me at a party. I asked you where your boyfriend was. Why didn't you tell me that you were married then?" She's like, "I forgot then too." And then he's just sitting there, like, staring at this, like, oh, what's gonna happen? And he just goes, "Oh, okay."
All
That
right.
makes sense.
Of course,
And
of
he's like,
course.
wait, is this just normal in this family? He's like, is this just a thing that they just kind of expect to happen? And they both seem like, yeah, this is a thing that happens all the time. She just forgets. And he's like, oh, okay then, I'll just roll with that.
Redo of Healer, like all that controversy, is just a crappier, um, like Goblin Slayer. That's it.
Oh yeah, isn't it? I was thought you were gonna say it was a crappier Shield hero, but Goblin Slayer too, I guess.
Yeah. Well, no. There's no crappier. No, it's not crappier than Shield. Yeah, it's not.
What, you think Shield Bro's worse?
No. Actually, I'm sorry. You're right. It's not worse. It's not worse at all. But it's just like the whole like edge premise, like with the whole like cutting. I don't know. It's BS. So let's talk about My Hero Academia while we're waiting for Caroline to come back. Um, which she will someday, I'm sure.
I believe in her.
I do too. What I want to know is, oh no,
Hey, there she is.
someone lit me on fire. Oh no, someone lit me on fire. Okay, that's fair. Redo of Incel.
Yeah.
So here's the best. Hold on.
The Scamboli review of Redo of Healer was actually hilarious.
Yeah. Oh, it was. It was pretty funny. But like the meme I saw that was the funniest was, so you took 6 months of being struggle snuggled, and then your new plan is only to have 2 months of being struggle snuggled. Is that right? That's
I am
right.
confused. I'm what? What?
I don't want to nuke our algorithm.
Now never mind. I gotcha. Now it's funny. Now that I get it, it's funny.
Right? That's right. Only 2 months of being.
We'll call it rhymes with creped.
No, just say struggle snuggle. What's wrong with you people?
As if it's not perfectly clear.
It's perfectly clear, but it's about fooling our AI overlords. The AI overlords that will give us ad revenue. Someday, maybe, hopefully.
I wouldn't count on it.
I don't either, but, I like to dream. I've got this, dream notebook that I do on the city bus as I go to my inner city college. Ban in it, dan it, dan it. Alright.
What?
What? I'm making a movie
confused.
reference.
You're confusing me.
It's a movie reference, okay? I don't even know what movie it is. I saw it in an American Dad episode, and basically they were doing a movie reference that I thought was funny as hell, because it's about Stan wanting to be the best man at some dude's wedding, played by I don't know. It's Principal Lewis. Point is, and he's sitting in an inner city bus with best man written on a one of those.
Oh, I think I remember this.
Yeah.
So American Dad is one of those shows where I would say maybe I don't know, 2 of every 5, 1 in every 3 episode is pretty good.
It's better.
And the others are terrible.
Oh yeah, some of them are just bad.
But occasionally I will watch it and I will non-ironically laugh at the episode. I'll go, okay, in spite of myself, I'll be like, okay, actually that was pretty funny.
There was a really funny one.
It's one of those, you know what I mean. It's one of those shows.
There was an episode called
Go ahead.
There's an episode called Rabbit Ears, which has Stan being drawn in to a TV set from the 1950s, played by Chris Pine. But what was it? Game night, and so season 17 was the most recent one. But game night Yuletide repeat, and Businessly Brunette was pretty funny. The Businessly Brunette story was kind of crap, but the jokes landed. Megabuster Shepard says, "Terrible people, terrible to other terrible people with a cat girl for reasons." It's called hitting the broadest possible demographic. Excuse me. It's edgier than Shadow the Hedgehog and emulating Wesley Snipes. You're absolutely right.
Guess who's back?
Gasp!
MC Hammer. Guess who's back? Wait, was that MC? No, that wasn't MC Hammer. Who was that?
Actually, in this case, it was Mystique from X-Men Evolution. I can't remember now which particular episode. Oh yeah, that was the one where she came back to whip the Brotherhood back into shape and brought Wanda with her. Changed the dynamic quite a bit.
Huh. Cool. Yeah, I have not seen the recent WandaVision. So, Caroline, you're here and you can hear us.
Yes.
And what's
So
more,
far.
I cannot hear myself, so that's fantastic. We're actually we're up. We're doing great. Lava potion on fireworks. So in this case, why don't you lead us in with Monster Hunter? My Hero Academia.
My hero.
I'm sorry.
My-
Sorry.
That's a good thing to start with My Hero, because I have yet to enter the world of Monster Hunter. Unless you're talking about Blade the Vampire Hunter. I don't think we've quite gotten into that kind of madness with My Hero Academia yet. So let's see, the latest issue.
Thank you, Aaron. Yep. Go for it.
The latest issue had, the backlash from the big fight with Shigaraki and the PLF. Whew, boy. That's almost like... I'm trying to think of an equivalent battle in Marvel Comics. It's almost like... Well, we'll go with something along the lines of Age of Ultron. People have completely...
I can see that.
Yep.
Yeah, people have completely lost the illusion that, what shall we say, peace and safety will reign for all time has been quite violently shattered. Prisoners from various institutions have escaped, thank you All for One, you nasty person you. And they're running around wreaking havoc. Interestingly, the civilians are starting to stand up and try to defend themselves, but they don't have the necessary training or equipment. Well, not the necessary practice in using it that a professional hero would. So people are getting hurt at the least, trying to fight back against the thugs who have been let loose, or getting killed. On top of this, we have Endeavor finally coming face to face with his past sins as they tear down society all around him and his particular life and the lives of his family members as well. And just as he's starting to crack under the weight, Shoto opens the door. And typical teenage boy slams it real quick and tries to avoid watching his father cry. But Endeavor's not having it. He invites him in, finds out that Shoto's not the only one in the hospital with an interest in seeing him. Natsu and Fuyumi are also looking to have a talk with Dad, and so is the missus. Rei Todoroki has returned, and she does not look particularly happy, though definitely healthier than she did a few issues ago.
It's a wonder what mental sanity will do to a person.
She doesn't look nearly as adrift as she did a few installments ago. She looks like she's got her mojo back, and she's going to make sure Endeavor listens to her this time.
Absolutely. So the big thing that they're setting up is more or less the consequences of the My Hero
Hmm.
Academia world. So you have a relatively complacent populace that even though everyone
Hmm.
has superpowers, most of them are not using them, whether by law or just by humanity. Um, there's, by the way, Megabuster Shipper says, I forget Age of Ultron exists sometimes. It feels more like a lost Iron Man movie than how Civil War feels like an Avengers film. I agree with that statement. Though I do remember Age of Ultron. I think I like that the one the best.
I think,
Uh,
yeah, Age of Ultron was kind of underrated. I think it got
Yeah.
people were disappointed in it at the time. I think because they were expecting it to be like the Empire Strikes Back of the Avengers and to go darker than it did, and it had some issues, but it also did
Yeah.
some stuff really well. And I
mhm.
think that
Hmm.
overall it was a pretty good movie.
But
Yeah,
the
it's actually one of my favorites in the entire franchise.
excellent. The what is that? So what you have then is the whole My Hero Academia world is ripe for villainous takeover. If the people cannot defend themselves against, the hordes of barbarians and so on and so forth, they will be taken over by the barbarians, and the barbarians will become the next government, even if they
Yeah.
clean themselves up. Like, take Rome.
Hmm.
We're watching it happen in America, that sort of thing.
Well, take AFO himself. The guy dresses very well, speaks very well. His head might look like a crushed potato, as someone described it right now, but the guy can lead. He's got charisma. He knows how to maneuver people. He knows where to put people with skills. If he sets someone up as a shadow ruler, he can't use Shigaraki. The public doesn't trust him. But if he can find someone whose strings he can pull, Japan's in trouble.
Yep.
It's hard to tell what Shigaraki's long-term plan, or not Shigaraki, All for One's long-term plan is actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's not really hitting it, and if they go the whole like Demon King route, which they're kind of hinting at, I'm gonna be really uninvested really soon. But for now, it's actually quite brilliant with how they're setting it up. It is the logical consequence of their action. The reason why, you know, America lasts as long as it did was because the citizens could take action into their own hands and did many, many times. Some not so well, like with John Brown. Others very well, like with the Athena thing post World War II, where
Oh,
Um,
some
the yeah,
Athens.
I know what you're
Yeah.
Athens,
referring
yeah,
to.
where
Athens, Georgia. Yeah.
yep, where they basically kicked out corrupt vote counters. Um,
Corrupt local politicians. Yeah.
yes, but it was about the counting of the votes and a few other things. But it's
Oh, yeah.
like, but like, so here's where the author will really be tested in his mettle. Can he
Hmm.
push the whole idea to its conclusion, or will he falter? Like, the American spirit, even with superpowers, doesn't change that much. Whoa. I just came back real loud.
Echo.
Maybe I should mute myself again uh, in between spots. Part of the problem that the society in My Hero Academia is facing is they've relied so much and so long on the heroes, specifically All Might, to keep the darkness at bay. It's
Yep.
to take a metaphor, it's like he was the sun, he rose, and it was daylight, and everything looked wonderful. Heroes didn't have to work so hard, which we'll get back to in a minute about Endeavor, but the whole thing with All Might running around saving everybody, his power was such, and he, as we know now, he pumped up the physical aspects of One for All so much that it looked like he could handle everything and that he would always be there helping people out. Basically, he looked like a god in the small G sense. He was almost everywhere. We see this in the first few episodes too, when Deku's at UA for the first time. Where's All Might? the whole reason the USJ attack even works is that All Might spent used up his 3 hours of what's the word? His 3-hour his time limit in 3 hours hopping around saving people whose cars are going to crash or who are jaywalking or something. The guy seemed to be everywhere. And the criminals didn't want to stick their heads out of the shadows in case he knocked their heads off. So they stayed back and stayed in the shadows, and everything looked peaceful and quiet, and you could become a hero, get all the praise, all the adoration. Easiest gig ever. All you gotta do is occasionally stop some muggers because All Might's here. And this is where things get interesting, because Endeavor is definitely not going to win Father of the Year prizes anywhere anytime soon.
Mm-hmm.
He's focused too much in the past on beating All Might however he could, making himself the best. Meant that he mistreated his family horribly. But in a way, he was looking ahead in a manner that All Might was not. All Might was very much focused on the present, keeping everybody safe, especially those close to him. He'd already lost someone to All for One, Nana. So he didn't want to lose an apprentice like Night Eye to him. And he didn't want to lose Gran Torino. That meant that he didn't get close to anyone. He didn't have any relationships with women, which makes Shoto's initial idea about Deku all the more funny. But Endeavor realized somehow, some way, and this was made very clear actually in the last episode of season 4. Remember?
Describe it for us.
It was the last episode, because Hawks was helping him deal with Hood, the High End.
Mm-hmm.
And we see Endeavor from Hawks' perspective, where he says nobody else was challenging All Might. No one was trying to surpass him. The only one who did was Endeavor. Now, we all know, and the whole world in My Hero Academia knows, that the way he was doing it was definitely not right. But he had a point. From a personal perspective, he was focused mainly on beating All Might himself and being the best, or failing that, having one of his children beat All Might and be the best.
Yep.
Subconsciously, perhaps, he was also thinking in practical terms. You've compared him to Batman in a manner of speaking, but the thing that Endeavor was thinking of was, I'm not always going to be here. Because he couldn't beat All Might, he had to think in the long term. And the long term is, Endeavor is not always going to be alive. Someday he's going to die. Someday, so is All Might. Well, then, that means they're mortal. They're not the gods that they appear, especially All Might. They need to start thinking about the future, which makes his contingency plan, on one level, make a lot more sense. He still pursued it very, very poorly. But on the one hand, it makes a great deal of sense.
Mm-hmm.
He saw what no one else, except perhaps Hawks, recognized, which is that day is not always followed by night. It's not always going to be here. You have to be ready for when night falls. Deku and Class 1A have been dealt quite a few, even before this particular battle, quite a few punches where they've learned that, okay, the shadows are growing longer. Ochako even said that last issue, in a previous issue. The shadows have been growing longer. Danger is creeping out. Evening is coming and night is about to fall. So the kids have been on the front lines, and they've been picking up on these vibes, which a lot of the wider hero society hasn't been. Because they're close to the kids and a target anyway, due to their status as the best school for heroes in Japan. UA's staff has been on the front lines more often than many others And they've been feeling the vibes too, going, okay, we've got an earthquake coming. We've got to try and be prepared. And nobody was prepared, even fans, for the particular battle that came. So now there's fallout. They knew it was coming. The kids had a sense that it was coming. Now they have to deal with it. The kids have to deal with a lot of the trauma that they've experienced or seen secondhand. In a manner of speaking, the rest of Class 1A has seen quite a bit of trauma because they found their dead teacher. And that had to hurt.
Yep.
Someone said something about her body being violated at one point. And even if that didn't happen, it's no fun seeing someone you care about dead and realizing there's nothing you can do. You didn't save someone. Everybody else who was at Jakku Hospital has a different kind but similar type of fallout. Ochako and Sue have to deal with the fact that they were digging around in the rubble while their friends and mentors were being taken for medical treatment. We don't know how many dead bodies they found. We know they found a lot of people hurt and scared, and that Ochako at least saw somebody decide to quit. Now, it'll be interesting to see how many of the students decide that they've had enough. After something like this, nobody's going to hold it against them. Things have gone from simmering to a full boil. It is open war. And most of the heroes can't handle it. The kids, after a point, should not be expected to carry this weight. There are several extenuating circumstances that put them in a place where a number of them are going to have to carry the weight. Deku is the focal point because he's the one who has the quirk All for One. And along with Shigaraki, we now have All for One on the loose, and they definitely want the quirk. Izuku is marked. Anybody close to him, including his mother and his father, anybody who lives in the next apartment complex over, is a target. Heck, if he wants to, AFL can just pick someone off the street and use them as a bargaining chip because Izuku's greatest strength and greatest weakness is he wants to help. He wants to protect people. He wants to save people, emotionally and as well as physically. Everywhere he goes, anybody else is a target. And if he's not careful, he's going to end up isolated and pushing everybody in the class and everybody else away from him. So we'll have to see how things go there. Because it looks like, from what we've seen, Bakugo is not going to stand for that. And Bakugo has done quite a bit of character development these last few chapters. And given his desire to win and his newfound desire to save people, the odds of him quitting and going home are not good. Shoto has a responsibility to take care of Toya because Endeavor cannot bring himself to fight his son. He couldn't even bring himself to fight when his son's life was on the line with ending. The only one who can deal with Toya because he's had the training and has some idea of where he's coming from is Shoto. So these three are definitely going to stay in the fight. Ochako is another likely one, not necessarily because she's a fighter, but because she's going to want to help save people. She's made that her modus operandi since she couldn't save Night Eye. So she's not going to run from the fight because A, she promised that she would save more people, and B, Deku's in the middle of the fight. She's not going anywhere.
First off, I'm gonna give a few little quick shout outs to Bradford Walker and Barwell Studios. Anthony, give us an opinion. Unless Anthony's not. Oh, there he is.
No, I'm here. I'm listening.
I'm going to mute my mic. I'm making you guys...
Thank you.
My opinion is that just please get rid of Mineta. He's not funny.
He's not funny. He is not funny at all. And there's no
Okay,
like room for character
so here's
growth
the
either.
thing with yeah. Here's the thing about Mineta. I don't necessarily like begrudge the character because reading Horikoshi talk about Mineta is actually kind of funny. Because Horikoshi obviously realizes that nobody likes Mineta. Like, if you read his stat, like they have character polls, and I think Mineta's always at like the very bottom of the polls. And like Horikoshi when he talks about it goes, I've always been pretty disappointed that nobody liked Mineta because I always saw Mineta as like my author stand-in. He reminds me of me when I was his age, which is honestly pretty funny. But the meta joke of Mineta is not worth the character of Mineta. I mean, it helps, but not that much.
Mm-hmm.
That's an interesting point because especially with Midnight's death, I'd like to see where he might take Mineta, because if Mineta is like what he was at his age, what's he gonna be like when he grows up?
Yeah, I mean, I just remember Mother's Basement Jeff had a pretty good joke once when he was talking about MHA. He goes, they're going to build a society. I think that MHA is leading towards them building a society of stronger heroes where everybody is heroic and Mineta. And, that's kind of my opinion. Don't get me wrong, there are a couple of good moments. The first movie, Two Heroes, had like the only good Mineta joke that's ever been told on the entire show. When he starts going harem to himself as he climbs up the wall, was pretty funny. Honestly, seeing Mineta in the theater was seeing that movie in theaters was pretty fun because it was of course all with My Hero Academia fans. But when Mineta showed up, literally you could hear the entire theater groaned. Mineta showed up on screen, everyone went, "Aww." Like, oh man, we're gonna have to deal with him the whole movie.
He's a part of this too.
Yeah.
Like, there's an argument for comic relief. Like, I think Denadane or something like that, one of the Knights of King Arthur, like, is the comic relief knight. But they don't make him any less of a knight. He just shows up and, like, makes fun of other knights. And so I think in the Holy Grail, they're talking about Lancelot, and then he goes, yeah, and I bet he walks on water, too. Which is, like, making fun of Lancelot's purity, supposedly. Anyway, like they don't take it, like, it's one of those things where I can see how it's funny. I getcha. He's a pervy high school student that looks like a 3-year-old. I understand.
The problem is it's not funny.
Yes.
Just so they have a similar character-ish type in Bakuman. With they have the one guy. First, they have two versions of this sort of gag or a similar-ish gag. There's Nakai, who's really not comic relief, who's just the big fat guy, who I think you said was your least favorite part of Bakuman.
Yep.
And they also, though, they had the other character who I actually thought was they had the manga creator who marries Miss Aoki eventually. He eventually gets engaged to Miss Aoki in Bakuman.
Yep.
And he has a similar thing going on where he puts women on a pedestal and very gamma behavior or whatever. Except that with him, I actually thought he was pretty funny. Like, so the editor, the whole thing with him is that he actually hates making manga and started making manga like on a whim, but it turned out that he was a genius. So Shonen Jump, like, tasked their editor basically just do anything you can to keep him making manga at any cost. So he starts like, first he starts like baiting him with like little tips on how to pick up women, and specifically like how to get Miss Aoki. Then at one point, just to make sure that he can't stop making manga, he like convinces him to take out a huge loan on an expensive apartment and cars so that now he's locked into these long-term loans and he has no choice but to keep making manga. Uh, so him I actually found pretty funny, even though he's sort of a similar joke type in that it involves creepy pedestalization of women. But I think what made him work a little bit better was that there was more to that character. Like, don't get me wrong, there wasn't a lot more to that character. It wasn't a deep character, but you know, it was a character where more existed to him than just is a perv.
Right.
Like, you know, there was more there. The other stuff going on with him was like, I don't know. Uh he has a really cynical outlook. He has a really cynical outlook on life. He is he's naturally kind of lazy. He pedestalizes women, but he doesn't actively disrespect them the way that Mineta always does every time he talks about women, and you're just supposed to laugh at that. Only it's not funny.
Right.
And I get that there's the whole thing. I get that there's a whole, you know, sort of subculture of both SJWs who are super concerned with this stuff and people reacting to the SJWs who post big anime titty memes on Twitter all the time. And I really have contempt for both sides of that dispute, though obviously more contempt for the SJWs. But I'm really not very sympathetic to the all hail the anime titty people. I think it's more cringe than anything else. And I guess that's how I think of Mineta. It's not that Mineta is SJ. It's not that Mineta is somehow like, I don't know, not feminist or woke enough or whatever. It's not that he's problematic. It's not that there's any issue with him in theory. It's that he is not funny. He's cringe.
Bro, you posted cringe, bro.
Yeah. Like, it's really that simple. If Mineta were good,
There is a skeleton with a glitter wand coming after me.
then care. But just think of Kazuma in the Konosuba in Konosuba. Basically, everything he does and says is problematic, and it's hilarious.
Right? Like, the thing is,
I
though,
know I went on a massive tangent here, but the thing is, I agreed with everything Caroline said, and I always enjoy bashing Mineta. So yeah.
I will say the one scene that Mineta had that I thought was funny was when he was trying to peep at the girls' locker room, and Jiro sticks her ear jack in his eye. And that wasn't the funny part, really. It was her reaction to what he was saying, because Ochaka says, "Oh, gee, thanks, Jiro, you saved us." And Jiro's leaning up against the wall, very unhappy. He didn't say anything about me. And I laughed. I laughed because
Yeah,
I
that was
thought
funny.
that is exactly what a girl would think.
I also liked when they had Koda guarding the girls' baths in this was way
Oh, yeah.
earlier in the story, and he like
Yeah.
kicks Mineta in the balls and throws him over the side, and then he says something along the line, and then Koda says something on the lines of, "You call yourself a hero and you're a pervy scumbag," like, you know, you sicken me, and I was just like,
Yeah.
oh my god, I agree with every word he just said. He's
Yeah.
right. He basically says something along the lines of like, "You sicken me. You're a scumbag, and you have the balls to call yourself a hero." Like, man, go Horikoshi. Why can't you do stuff like this more often? Just make Mineta suffer more.
Yeah, that was a good scene too. I liked that one. I think it was he said, "Learn to be a decent human being before you be a hero," and kicked him off the wall. I felt bad for Ida after that though.
Oh,
Mega Buster Shepherd says, "Thank you, Anthony. I will accept the thanks, but I don't know what it's for, so
it is accepted.
I accept your thanks, however."
So, let's go back to probably one of the more interesting character arcs Because like Minetta's a comedy thing, and maybe there's some actual opportunity for growth now that what's her name,
Miss Midnight.
Miss Midnight
Yeah.
has
It would. I
uh,
don't think you could salvage everything that's happened so far, but I could at least accept the character if Mineta grows.
right, like, you know, there's a certain amount of perviness and all that jazz. But the thing is that like, if he stays a static character after this, or like, so I'm going to use this, and then I'm going to come back around to what I really want to talk about, which is Endeavor, which is like the most interesting thing happening
Hmm.
in an MHA. Mineta has two
Yeah.
paths in front of him. Well, three, but one is a non-path, and I don't count it. I don't count. No rider should ever count a non-path, which is him staying the same. Either he grows or he leaves. If he leaves, it's called a shoo out the clowns. All the comedy relief kind of passes away, and it's all seriousness because we're going into the end game and we need our game face on. Maybe he comes back after a redemption arc, but that just swings around to number two, in which case he changes for the better to be a better person and a true hero. We've had story arcs for a lot of the characters going so far. Ochako has had one. Suru was kind of a flat character, even though she's probably one of the better girls. But she's
Who?
Suru, Froggy,
Oh,
Froppy,
Suyu.
Suyu. Excuse me.
Yeah.
That's right.
Okay, I got you.
Um, you know, there's a whole bunch of stuff to it. If Mineta grows, then it's fantastic and it's a great choice. Even if we don't like the character, and honestly, you know, if you're just there for comic relief, there's not much you can do with it. There's still going to be some great stuff that can be done. When that comes up, we're coming into Endeavor, and we're actually reaching sort of the climax of his arc, and the beginnings of what I would call like Shoto as the real hero. Endeavor, he shows up, and I described him like Batman, but I didn't describe him like Batman in the sense of like he's Batman. I'm in the sense of he's the number two hero, but he's the number two hero with a will. Like, one of the things I've sort of accepted about myself is that even though I'm not like this competitive go getter, oh, I've got to get the best of all times, and I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, is that, well, sorry, not competitor, I mean like in the sense of sales and like getting people to do things and stuff like that, pushing myself to my limits, is that I do have ambition. You know, there's very few millennial riders running around right now. Christopher Paulinelli is a Gen Y rider. I'm a Gen Y rider. Um, Anthony is more the exception than anything else. And those millennial writers that I have read have all been SJW trash. Zula,
Caroline too, right? Caroline, you're millennial, aren't you?
I'm pretty sure. I get a little lost sometimes trying to keep track of everything, and the fact that people keep switching the names around doesn't help. But as far as I can tell, yes, I technically qualify as a millennial.
90 to
We here
99.
at Superversive Sci-Fi, use the Brian Niemeyer classification system.
Yeah.
Which, yeah, though I will say I'm not confined to my generation.
No, that's fair. You know, when I call you a millennial, it's not an insult. I don't
No.
spit when I say it.
No.
Mostly the names are from marketers more than anything else. They abandoned Gen Y, but the thing is that I have the explicit ambition to be the best Gen Y rider. I want to be remembered as such. I want my name up with John C. Wright and Nick Cole, and I write every day. I work hard for it.
Mm-hmm.
No, most people don't have that ambition. They just want to write because they want to write their stories or they want to make some money. Megabuster Shepard 31, my man, we share the same year. You're Gen Y. But the thing with the 31-year-olds like myself is that we have a bit of millennial in us, so we're a little bit a mix. We're mutts. But like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to make sacrifices for it. I'm not going to go all Endeavor on my kids, but, I will be making choices to that end no matter what. It's going to, whether or not it even matters that I hit that status when I hit old age. It doesn't matter. That's what I want. And I believe I have a God given gift to do it. Not that God has given me the gift of being the best, but rather the skills that are necessary. I know that I, can do the stuff with Pinkerton's Ghosts. Endeavor has the same mindset with heroism, but I don't have anyone of my generation I really consider a rival, except for Brian Niemeyer and a few others that I think if I work hard enough, I'll be way beyond them. But they're not the same as the number one hero. As in, the guy whose back the entire nation rests their hopes on. The guy who's so godlike. He is the equivalent of, whenever he goes on vacation, crime just skyrockets. Whenever he's asleep, crime just skyrockets because he is such a figure that he cannot be compared to. There's no other pinnacle but one for all.
Right.
That messes with a person, especially an ambitious man like Endeavor, who, even though he makes some bad and evil choices, he abuses his family. One kid just straight up is a serial killer. There's this funny little thing where it's like, I don't put it. It shows Dabby sitting there, and he goes, well, I don't put anything unnatural in my body. I eat organic. Dude, you do drugs. Is the reply. There's some very funny stuff out there. I can't post it because they say something ruder than dude. But it's like he's got a messed up kid. He has other messed up kids. His wife had a psychotic break and tried to mutilate one of her own kids. Like, that's a really real thing. Like it affects the mentality when your father figure is a man like Endeavor. And his story arc is coming back around to where, we can see what the choice has been. Endeavor is going to reconcile with his kids, which is a powerful story arc. It is probably the best thing. So when he became the number one hero, when he fought the high-end Nomu Hood, he won. But the amount of damage he took was absolutely insane compared to All Might, who would come out with a smile. Back straight, shoulders out, hand upraised. The amount of punishment this guy's going through is immense. And I just love the story arc that he's going through now. And I brought you guys on, to talk about it. Not just me ranting. I'm actually going to go back to playing Noita. Aaron VT, also a Gen Y. The only one published story so far. Hope to become a natural writer. Best of luck with the number one spot. Oh, I'm hoping. You see, I want to be like a grand old sage, fat and happy. And distributing wisdom and stuff. I don't know. I don't even know what it looks like. I just want it. Though, send Aaron. Send a email to pinkertonsghosts@gmail.com. It's on one of our Pinkertons things down in the side. I can't link it because I don't have access to chat through my Chrome extension. I don't know why. But yeah, send us a short story and we'll see if it's if we can work with it. Maybe we'll throw it up. No promises. Because I'm always thinking about Pinkerton's Ghosts, even when I'm thinking about anime. But yeah, give me your opinions on Endeavor's character arc. What's the good writing? What really stands out to
you? What stands out to me?
Yeah. Or either. Yeah.
I'm trying to remember
what my. Go ahead.
I'm trying to remember what my first impressions of Endeavor were. I'm used to seeing. Okay, this is gonna be a little bit of history here, but the first anime I remember watching that I eventually that I the first anime that I really watched and really fell in love with was Zoid's Chaotic Century, and one of the characters, he's the he's the dark image, the foil, if you will, to the hero, is a horrible, horrible person. He's the same age as the hero, so that means he started being a horrible person when he was roughly 14, maybe 13. He might have been at it a year before he appears on stage in the series. And this guy, that's serial killer's not the word. The word is
Mass
the
murderer.
word they used. Well,
Psycho.
he never attacked civilians. He only went after other soldiers. They called him a maverick because he was as likely to turn on fellow soldiers as he was on the enemy. But for the most part, he was pointed at the enemy. He was kind of like the Winter Soldier, an asset that they would haul out or tell it's kind of a attack dog. You go and handle this. And he was the right hand of the guy trying to become emperor. I hated that guy. I really wanted them to kill him because he was horrible. He enjoyed hurting the hero. He enjoyed hurting his friends. Then they came to an episode called The Distant Stars, and we get to see his backstory, where his parents were Zoid researchers. And he wanted to spend more time with them, and they wanted to spend more time with him, but their research meant that they were not exactly neglectful, but they worked too much, and they didn't spend as much time with him as they'd have liked. Then one night, after he's been stargazing with his father, he hears a crash in the lab. They were studying a small type of Zoid called an organoid, and it broke out of the cage, and it killed them. He came on this scene, saw it, lost his temper, and tried to get revenge, only to get smacked into a wall. After that, he had a combination amnesia, and the trauma was so much he just blocked it out. And that was a very illuminating episode on a number of levels for me as a writer and as a fan of the show. I was not happy when he continued on with his crusade against the hero after that point, but then you come to a later episode where his own organoid, who's been his only companion, dies. It was the first time that guy cried ever as an adult or a character in the show, and not in a flashback when he was a kid, and even then when the tears just appeared and he then attacked the organoid. This time he actually cried. That kind of thing sticks with you as both a writer and a fan. So I'm always on the lookout for something like that in other stories, because, okay, if they did that once with really, really well with this series, and I know they've done it in a couple of others since, what are they going to do here? So it helps. It helps not only with anime, it helps with other shows like Star Wars, because as soon as I saw one of the characters who was an Imperial, I thought, yeah, you're going to be a rebel one of these days. So I did not like Endeavor when I saw him first, but I figured he would probably not stay as nasty as he appeared in the first episode. And they gradually started peeling back layers. For a while there, he wasn't present, so you didn't get to see him much. Then we come to the big fight with All for One and Camino, in Camino Ward. Oh boy. As soon as he sees All Might in his natural form, and he loses his temper, I thought, there you go. That's the area. This is where you start turning around. I was honestly, at the time, I hadn't figured out just how slow Horikoshi was taking the characterization, so I thought it would be a little bit faster than it has been. But he's been changing ever since then. And you get a little bit more of it, like when they're with the kids, Shoto and Bakugo, as part of their training, and you see Shoto using his fire to warm up the kids whose hands are cold because they've been on his ice slide. And you can see right there the way Endeavor looks at him and sees what he's doing and realizes, I didn't do that for him. And then, of course, you get to the high-end fight where Shoto realizes he cares. He's gotten past the last of the resentment, which he realized he had in the what was it, pro hero test. He's gotten past it, but he doesn't think at that point that he cares until he sees his father losing.
Mm-hmm.
Then he goes forward and he asks Bakugo and Deku if they want to intern with his father. Earlier in the series, that might have been considered, asking for moral support. This time, you could see it still as some moral support, but he also recognizes that it's also possible that he's trying to gauge just how much his father has and hasn't changed. And he can't do that alone, because if it's just him and the interns, it's not necessarily that he's going to be able to tell what his father's doing. If he's got other people with him he trusts and sees how his father is handling them, then he can separate memory from present fact. In a way, they're more moral support for him to keep him on track than they are moral support for him to face Endeavor. So we go through all these wonderful moments where Endeavor starts to pick up and starts to grow into the role of first... Oh, shoot. What's the title?
Number 1.
Number 1. Where he's... Thank you. Where he's growing into the role of number 1 hero. And now he finds out something. This is typically, even in the West, used for the young up-and-comer who's rising to stardom, only to find out the enemy has set it all up for him to build him up and then knock him down. Mystique said, "I'm sharp blade cutting your strings just to watch you fall," in an episode of X-Men Evolution, and this is where Dabi has set himself. He's set himself up to push Endeavor up to the breaking point, and this, he doesn't care what it does to the rest of society. His main aim is to kill Endeavor and his brother. So now Endeavor has had the rug yanked out from under him, where he has made all this progress, and he's thought he's at least doing some atonement, only to find out that no, this isn't atonement, it was a setup from the start. Now he's had everything that he built and that he thought others were helping him build at this point, because he's changed enough that he can see the difference. And it's all been yanked out from under him by his own son. That's quite the drop. From the top of the world to the bottom of the pit. It's no wonder that Ray came out of the hospital to talk to him at this point. Because, and this ties in with Endeavor, he and All Might have both separated themselves from society for different reasons. All Might did it to protect more people because he knows what happens to the previous One for All users. Anybody connected to them was a target. All for One would go through them to get to the One for All user. So he separated himself from everyone to protect everyone. Meaning that, as you said, Ben, he's like Atlas with the world on his shoulders. And he's not a god like Atlas was. It takes its toll on him, and he eventually needs to seek a successor. Endeavor pushed almost everybody away. He's got a loyal agency with lots of loyal sidekicks and a loyal fan base. But in terms of people close to him, the closest person is Hawks. And in this case, Hawks can't reach him. Hawks is dealing with the fallout from his actions and his past. And he's going to try to help the only way he knows how. But he can't be there to help Endeavor pick up the pieces. To this point, Ray has been hiding in the hospital because she can't face Endeavor, or she couldn't face Endeavor up to this point. He was not ready to listen to her. And he had driven her to a psychotic breakdown. She had no one, like him, she had no one to lean on, but that was due to the isolation of embarrassment. She and her family seem perfect from the outside. How can she shatter that? How can she ruin her husband's image? Because he is a good hero and he is a good man, but he's let anger, frustration, and disappointment lead him astray. So she said nothing for 10 years and some years before that out of love for him. But this left her adrift too in the 10 years when she was in the hospital. And this is why she didn't come out, even when her children started visiting her more, and she made her peace with Shoto. What is she supposed to do? They're still living with their father, and they have their own lives now. Do they really need her? So she was still drifting along in the hospital until she saw Dabi's message. And that snapped her out of this, because now they all need her. Previous to this, Endeavor was more or less the rock the whole family rested on. He was terrible, but you knew he wasn't going to move. We see that in the fight with Hood. Shoto, part of the reason Shoto just stares and then loses his temper and backs his father up, or encourages his father, is he realizes the rock that his entire world stood on just shifted. Endeavor wasn't a great father, fine. He was his father. He was a pillar of his world, and he moved. And that's scary. Well, now, Endeavor has had the ground yanked out from under him, leaving a gaping hole in their world, and the kids are going to go in after him due to outside pressure and the fact that there's a vacancy there. So the next pillar of their world, Rei, has to stand up and start holding them together. She has to be the other support, the one who holds the line and makes sure that they stay together. Which is why she comes in now and looks the way she does at Endeavor. And Endeavor. Okay, the chickens have come home to roost. You don't get to go and commit seppuku physically or with drink or just collapse and give in to the black dog. You have to stand and fight, because I'm here and I still need you. The kids are here and they still need you. And yes, things are going to be terrible for a while, because now everybody knows about your sins and they're not going to let you forget them, even though you've changed. Because I can see you've changed. The kids know you've changed, even if Natsu at least doesn't admit it. And Toya needs you, because hopefully Shoto and no one else will have to kill him. But if they do, they're gonna need you to back them up. Which is an interesting dichotomy all on its own, and dichotomy might not be the right word, but it's a very neat balance that Horikoshi has struck with that, because usually, especially here in the West, we're more used to the father being a savage who, once he's ousted, the family goes back to being happy. Horikoshi hasn't done that. He's made it clear that they still need Endeavor as father and husband, and Rei's going to make sure he comes back. We'll see how it goes and how Horikoshi does it, but I, for one, am very, very interested in what happens next.
Same here. Speaking from
Anthony, what do you think?
Yeah, go for it.
Sorry. I was just wondering what Anthony thought.
So the Endeavor stuff in My Hero Academia is pretty interesting. I know that there was this was another one of those story arcs that it's died down a little bit, but there was like some backlash surrounding it for, you know, the meme way of saying it was like it was focusing on man pain or something. By the way, I have the Super Bowl halftime show on mute in the background. and it looks horrendous. Just throwing that out there. Anyway, I can't hear it, of course, but it looks like I would hate it. All right, back to the interesting conversation. Anyway, so the whole backlash with Endeavor and all of that was kind of interesting at the time. So my sister, in fact, I think this was just yesterday. Like my sister said, I was curious what the sane people, if there were any sane people objecting to the Endeavor story, and why they were objecting to it, and not just like people crying about too much focusing on Endeavor's man pain or something, which is obviously an absurd comment, but I am, she's right though. She's like, I'm curious if there are any sane people who have an issue with the story. Like, what is actually the problem, right? Like, supposing that there is one. And apparently, it really only comes down to two major things. One of them comes from what I would call at this point, holy crap, this halftime show looks like a disaster. I'm sorry. I'm just looking at whatever the hell they're doing on here. It's pretty funny. Anyway, so there was now what I would call an infamous scene in the Dinner with the Todorokis arc, which was one of the more popular arcs of the manga, I believe, where Deku and Bakugo go to the Todoroki's house for dinner. And while they are at the house, I am going off of memory because it's going to take me a while to actually find the chapter. Bradford Walker says Super Bowl halftime show being a satanic ritual again for the umpteenth time. Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, so in the chapter, it's all about how the different members of the family deal with deal with Endeavor, basically. So Shoto is working towards forgiving Endeavor. Natsuo, the oldest brother, can't forgive Endeavor. And Fumie has already forgiven Endeavor, or at the very least was never as upset at him, and is trying to sort of keep a bond with him. So that's what the chapter is about, exploring that from the perspective of Deku and Bakugo there kind of as comic relief, because throwing lit dynamite into any room is always going to be entertaining, which is what Bakugo is. So there is a line in that chapter where Deku says, after Natsuo has an outburst at Endeavor where he basically says, no, I can't forgive you, you're a piece of human garbage and I never want to see you again. Deku says to Shoto, I think that you're going to forgive your father one day, Shoto, because you're a very caring person yourself. And apparently this pissed a lot of people off at the time. The idea being that Deku saying this, and Deku is our viewpoint character, he's the main character, he's the guy we're supposed to identify with, and he's the one who keeps sparking changes in in Todoroki's outlook. So supposedly you're supposed to take what he says to him seriously. The implication here is that Todoroki will forgive Endeavor because he's a caring person. But if you don't forgive Endeavor, if like Natsuo, who literally just said he wouldn't do that, you are not a caring person. And that implication made a lot of people mad. The second reason that people give for their any issues they would perceive with the Endeavor arc, they said the narrative is basically doing a lot of what Endeavor's doing by it doesn't really focus on Fumie or Natsuo at all. It honestly doesn't even really focus on Shoto that much. It focuses heavily on how Endeavor is dealing with the situation. The arc is Endeavor's arc. And sure, Endeavor is handling it, it's not like Horikoshi is giving Endeavor a pass for any of the evil shit he did. He is not. Endeavor, if anything, keeps getting told off over and over and over again, going all the way up to Dobby, and now with Ray coming into the hospital room and telling him, basically quit your whining. There are people who are suffering worse than you because of the mistakes that you've made, which is a great line, by the way.
Wait, did it actually say that?
So I'm paraphrasing, but what they said was very close to it.
I think I
Let
missed
me
the
see,
page.
since this is the most recent chapter, I should be able to find this one pretty easily. Hold on.
Oh.
My Hero
Oh.
Academia.
Well, it's
Here it is.
interesting.
Here it is.
Oh, sorry, I'll wait.
Yeah, sorry about your microphone. But okay.
No, I was just gonna fill air while you found it, but you found it, so I'm gonna wait.
Yeah, it's the latest chapter, so this is an easy one. So, Endeavor. Wow, sorry. Anyway, Endeavor has a scene where he goes, "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize until now these regrets, this guilt, it's too late to matter. My heart, it's..." And then Ray steps forward, who's the mother, and says, "Yes, what about your heart? Those regrets and guilt, the rest of us have borne that burden much more than you have." So that's the line I'm referring to. So she's basically saying, "Shut up with your whining. People are suffering worse than you for the mistakes that you've made."
So there's a great Roman story about this guy. I can't remember. He basically ran a rebellion against somebody or other. And then they captured him. And so he's been tried and he's going to be executed. So his wife comes in. She's hidden a dagger, and she basically goes, "Kill yourself." And he goes, "No, I'm not going to do that. Like I'm not just going to fall on my sword. What are you talking about? A good Roman falls on his sword when he's got nothing left." Back and forth, and then finally she kills herself with the dagger and goes, "Oh, see how easily the dagger slides under my breast. If only it would do the same to you," or something. Like basically. So she kills herself right in front of him, and then he kills himself after in shame. And like the whole thing was basically, "What are you, a man? They've got you dead to rights. It's time to take the Roman option out." And even though the Romans didn't have the same honor culture that the Japanese had, they still had seppuku. Like a lot of Romans killed themselves when they lost when they lost the war. And it's like, wow, it just kind of reminds me of that. Like what kind of that's a real woman. Like, oh my goodness. Oh.
Yeah, Ray walks in and basically tells him, it says more kindly than that, but she basically says, "Stop your whining. You think you're upset about the mistakes that you've made. There are people who, because of these mistakes, are suffering a lot worse than you are right now. So shut up with your whining." Which is a great line and great moment. So basically, the idea is that because it focuses so heavily on Endeavor and Endeavor's responses, it's minimizing it's minimizing the perspectives of the abused and the people who were actually affected by the abuse. So I think there are a few responses to that. I don't think that's a particularly compelling argument, and it's by far the best that I've heard in terms of, any sort of issue with this arc. I mean, the first and most obvious issue here is that sounds like somebody is complaining about a story that they would like told, not about the story as it is actually being told.
Yep.
As in, you haven't actually demonstrated that there is anything wrong with the story as it's being told to me. You've just told me a preference that you yourself would like to see. But that preference doesn't say anything as to the quality of what we're getting. Or even, for that matter, as to the appropriateness of it.
Yep.
So, in terms of the appropriateness of it, one thing that I think you would need to be rereading things in an extremely tortured way to say that Horikoshi has been anything but extraordinarily critical of Endeavor. In fact, he has piled abuse on the dude, like
Yeah.
over and over and over and over. He has not let Endeavor just slide with his, with his bullshit or with his mistakes or any of that stuff. Every time it looks as if Endeavor, like, maybe he's making amends and can make an out, Horikoshi is always coming in with that little, that little tiny dagger to slip between the cracks of the armor and go, it's not that easy, all culminating all the way with the Dobby reveal. So the Dobby reveal is great because it shows that Endeavor can make all of this progress with his family, but at the same time, like, all of the mistakes that he's made aren't just erased as a result of it, and the impact of those mistakes reverberates in larger ways than Endeavor ever could have, wanted or anticipated, but that doesn't matter, which is kind of what Ray says. You think you're sorry, you're upset, stop your crying, right? Like,
Right.
there are people who are suffering worse than you are right now, and all because of the mistakes that you've made. Dobby is your fault, right? Like, nobody cares if you're sorry. Nobody cares if you're sorry. Go ahead.
No, I'm glad you brought this one up because I've run into this several times, and it's very interesting to me for two reasons. One, and this goes back to the whole argument where people got upset. I didn't know that it was the line where Deku says, I think you're getting ready to forgive him because you're a very caring person. Well, the thing is, forgiveness has a double-edged sword. In this case, where it comes with Shoto, is he needs to forgive. We keep thinking of forgiveness as a sort of cleaning the slate. Oh, you forgive that person, so therefore you're gonna make nice and be friends and everything. And if the person's a nasty, horrible person, if you forgive, say, Shigaraki, well, you're just gonna let him walk all over you. Well, no, that's not how forgiveness works. Forgiveness is something you give to the other person. It doesn't matter how they receive it, it's what you give. At the same time, too, forgiveness is about letting go. Shoto, as we saw with the Pro Hero test, he was still carrying at that point a certain amount of resentment for his father, and it cost him that Pro Hero license. If he does not forgive, then he's going to keep running into these problems where he can't pass on, he can't change himself. He will go into a spiral and he will lose himself. So in that respect, it was what Deku said about you're a kind person, it was encouragement in saying that, yeah, you're doing the right thing because you are this type of person. And we actually see that even in the flashbacks. Shoto is not Toya. Toya wanted to be like his father. This was the part of the reason why I think Rei splashed boiling water on Shoto's face, is she had Toya's example, where Toya's doing everything he can to get it to Endeavor's attention. And because Shoto has come along and has both quirks, he's getting ignored. And she was worried at the time that something like that would happen to Shoto. So she lost it and splashed water on his face, thinking, well, if he looks less like his father, maybe his father will lose interest. And then, of course, she snapped out of it and realized what she'd done and ended up in the mental hospital, in part because she didn't fight it, because I burned my son's face. There's something wrong. The second part of forgiveness, and this ties in, did either of you ever see Stargate SG-1?
Yeah.
No.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
I love that show. Big part of my job.
Oh, okay. Did you ever get to Stargate SG-1, the Arc of Truth movie?
Yeah. Yes, but it's been years, and I don't really remember.
Yeah, I haven't seen it in a while myself, but there was one scene that stuck with me. It's when Teal'c, played by Christopher Judge, talks to Vala's husband from the other galaxy. I can't remember his name. But this other guy has just come to terms with the fact that he was serving false gods. who he did horrible things to spread their religion. And he's on the ship with all the Air Force personnel who've been told to command it. And he's in the mess hall and he's trying to come to terms with that. And Teal'c, who was also a servant of a different set of false gods and committed atrocities on their behalf before he joined SG-1 at the beginning of the 10-season series, sits at the table with him and he starts talking to him. And I can't remember what her husband said to precipitate this, but Teal'c came back hard as nails and said, when people talk about forgiveness, that is more about them than it is about you. And his point was, they are letting go of their anger at you, at what they are carrying in result of what you did. You now have to carry the results and the weight of your past. And you have to figure out how to forgive yourself over time and accept that, yes, you did this, and yes, this has these types of consequences, and no, after a point, I can atone and maybe get to heaven, but there's no changing what I did. There's no changing how I got here. And this is, I think Endeavor's about to get slapped upside the head with this, because Ray has come in and done something similar to what Teal'c did in that scene. Is no, you don't get to go and get all melodramatic and fall apart. You can't change that. You're different now. We all know that. But you don't get to cry and curl up in a hole and run away. No. You stand and you face it.
Yep.
Which makes, yeah.
Like, there's a lot of good reasons for there to be, things like Endeavor running around. My dad had a horrible childhood. He and his brother, like, almost literally ran each other over with cars. It was like fighting. There's all these different things that happened. His dad died, all this stuff. And it doesn't excuse, his temper, his choices. Just like it wouldn't excuse me, my choices. If I start shouting at my kids, I'm the villain. It doesn't matter, if I learned that behavior from dad or whatever. I'm at fault. Ben Wheeler, me. Endeavor has the opportunity to say, please forgive me. It doesn't change the damage that's been done. And they're talking things like, oh, man pain. Listen, men kill themselves more than women have ever done. I don't think it's something you can just brush away. One of the biggest things that helped me with my hatred of my father, and literal hatred, like standing over him, it's like I could probably make it look like an accident. Like it was real. It was very real. It was very painful. Was me saying, "Hey, dude, yeah, he was a dick." Okay. And then, like, the rest of it started falling in place. I could forgive him. I don't expect him to ever go, oh, I'm so sorry, have an Endeavor moment or anything like that. The character arcs that we're seeing are not real people. They are written words that are made so well that these things that connect us to our real lives can be transposed onto it to hit it. This is why this is my favorite character arc. Sure, there's a little bit of like what I want to see out of my own father, but it's like it's the characterization that hits. Mwah. Like all of a sudden Ray coming in at the perfect moment to say, gird your loins, see how easy the dagger goes into my own breast, all this stuff to put manhood back into him. Like Endeavor, if he wins the fight, has all the time in the world to repair his damaged relations. Family is a huge bond. Blood is a huge bond. But he has to win the fight first. Or Shoto has to. But, they have to deal with Dabi. Or else it's just never going to work.
So, yeah, the whole thing with Endeavor, I think that the issue I have with this whole idea of, oh, you're minimizing the victims, it comes down to, like, I know what people are saying here, so it sounds like I'm minimizing it if I say it like this. but there are no victims. They're not real.
Yep.
Like, I get the point. Like, it sounds like I'm minimizing the point that's trying to be made here, but I'm not. That's actually like central to what I'm trying to say here. Here is the thing. I don't care about Natsuo. I don't care about Fumie, except insofar as they relate to Endeavor. This is a consequence of how Horikoshi wrote the story, but you need to now convince me that for some reason Horikoshi can't write the story in such a way that Endeavor is the most interesting character. Why can't he? Why not?
Right.
Like, from my perspective, it's working out very well. Endeavor is a fascinating character. Absolutely mesmerizing. Can't miss television.
Right.
So
Perfect.
why
Every
would he
time.
do it? Yeah, why would he do it different? So why would he do it differently? There are no if there were real abusers that we weren't getting their side of the story, yes, that would matter, but there aren't. They're not real. Like, and when they're not real, what matters is the way that he's telling the story honest? Is it true? Is it compelling? And I think it's all of those things. You saying you want to see more of Fumie and Natsuo's side of the story is just you telling me a preference. And don't get me wrong, anybody is allowed to want whatever they want. If you would prefer that, that's okay. I mean, nobody can tell you you're wrong to have your own preferences. But you are wrong to say that that is a flaw. It is not. It's a preference. It's what you would like to see, but you haven't illustrated yet that there's any problem with the way that the story is currently being told. And like I said, it would be different if Horikoshi were giving Endeavor a pass. If he were using his man pain, if you want to use that terrible SJW term, but if he was using that to try and make excuses for Endeavor. But that is very much not what I see. Now, I will say this, the whole scene with Deku when he says, I think you're going to forgive Endeavor because you're a very caring person, I sort of get the objection there. Yeah, Aaron VT. Aaron VT says, with regard to the characters not being real, you have to understand how these people think. They think narratives create reality. Any narrative that gives Endeavor sympathy is unacceptable because it might provide sympathy to a real abuser. Yes, I do understand that. That is my objection. And I agree with you. You're absolutely correct. My objection to that is narratives don't create reality. Reality is reality.
Reality is reality.
Well, that's actually something else that's really disturbing too, is the whole thing about redemption arcs, whether you're talking about Teal'c or Endeavor, is they give you hope. They give
Yep.
readers hope.
Yep.
We all do horrible things. Maybe it's just one little moment where we snap at someone because, I've had a horrible day, and now my 5-year-old wants me to read a bedtime story, and I'm just too much, and I snap and I yell, and she runs away crying. Well, yeah, I'm gonna feel bad about that, and maybe that's a small thing, and the forgiveness and the repair damage is easy peasy. Maybe the damage is worse. The fact of the matter is, we all have these moments where, okay, I am so sorry, and like Endeavor, we cry. The whole thing about redemption arcs and stories is they give you hope that, okay, you can find a way to fix this. But you have to, as Anthony's pointed out, you have to accept that you did it, acknowledge that you did it out loud to everybody you've hurt. Dobby's probably not going to listen for a while unless you can tie him to a chair, and that's going to take work. Acknowledge what you did, and then make amends. And Endeavor has been acknowledging his sins with everybody but 2 people, Dobby and Ray.
Yep.
Yep. So, I get the issue with that people have in terms of Deku's comments to Shoto, because I get the idea. The implication there then is that Shoto is a caring person because he's willing to forgive Endeavor one day, maybe. But Natsuo, and that would mean that Natsuo, who doesn't want to forgive Endeavor, is not. So the idea is that it creates the impression that if you are not willing to forgive your abuser, even if they're sorry, then it means that you yourself are not as caring of a person. and they think that that's unfair to victims or whatever. Uh, so
Yeah.
I get I get the objection to a point.
One of the biggest
I
parts
think
of
that
healing is just forgiving. Like, that's it. It doesn't
so
matter what
I
they do. You just forgive them. Like, if
so
you,
I mentioned this though. Like there are a few things here. One is that have you ever actually heard stories from Holocaust survivors who have moved on and are healthy? I remember hearing one and then realizing that I had heard that same story before, and I mentioned it. This was in school, and I mentioned it, and they said, "No, you probably were hearing about a completely different person." So, and I'll tell you why there's relevance to what I'm trying to say. One thing you hear with Holocaust survivors, every single one of them, and I mean literally all of them that I've heard about who have moved on and are living healthy lives, or lived healthy lives after the fact, without fail, all of them forgave the Nazis. All of them. And they would have eerily similar stories, too. Like, you would hear stories and they would end up having to forgive the Nazis, and that was how they were able to move on and live healthy, productive lives. You know, so I don't know. With that said, there is something to the idea of, from the Christian perspective, if somebody is asking for your forgiveness, then we as Christians are supposed to forgive not just 7 but 70 times 7. You
yep.
know. So when Deku says that, there is a real sense in which Dodo being willing to forgive Endeavor, you're not supposed to say this, but he is a better person than Natsuo, who is not willing to. If Natsuo was not willing to open up be open to the possibility of forgiveness, yes, even to his abuser, then that is a failing on Natsuo's part.
It was the biggest part of my story arc. Go ahead, Carolyn. Sorry.
Yeah, and the thing is, Anthony's right, because if Natsuo's not going to forgive, then it's going to have worse and more painful repercussions than if he did forgive. And again, this comes back to a modern preconception about forgiveness, is that you have to be a doormat if you forgive somebody. You don't. Forgiving, as Tilk said, is all about the other person. The person who forgives you for what you did is releasing their burden, the leftover resentment and pain, so they can move on. And if Natsu's not ready to do that, then yeah, Shoto's the better person, and he's grown more than his older brother. And Natsu better get his act together, or he might not turn onto a Dabi, but he's gonna maybe become a rerun of Endeavor.
This is one of the few this is one of the bits of Full Metal Alchemist, actually. I know that I convince you, Carolyn, to watch Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. That's still my favorite show. It's my favorite anime. I think it's the most philosophically complex. I think that I think it has some of the most memorable characters, the best writing, all of this stuff. But one of the few things I actually think it got wrong-ish, I think it got it sort of right, but it was using the wrong language, was that Winry had a whole story arc with Scar in Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, and in an absolutely harrowing and brilliant flashback sequence in the show, because I'm going to praise the show even as I criticize it, because it really does deserve it, but in one of the most harrowing flashback sequences in the show, we learn how Winry's parents died and how Scar was able to do, and why Scar is able to do alchemy. And we learn that Scar woke up and in like a fit of rage, he murders Winry's parents. And he's almost like in a fugue state when he does it. And Winry specifically says to Scar that she is not going to forgive him, that she will work with him, that she will accept that he can do good things and do so. I will criticize this on the angle of what Winry did was forgive Scar. I mean, for all intents and purposes, everything she did in regards to Scar, she forgave him. It's like you said, there's a conflation there, though, where I think Full Metal Alchemist was pushing back against the idea that forgiveness of Scar was supposed to mean that, I don't know, that Winry was supposed to, like, say, hey, it's okay that you killed my parents. But that's never what forgiveness is supposed to,
Right.
I'm okay with it now. I'm okay with. However, Winry did have to say, and she does say, that I am okay with you now. And she does. She absolutely does that. She works with him. She trusts him. She accepts that he's a part of their team, that he has changed and is a better person. You know. So for all intents and purposes, she's forgiven him. I think that Arakawa was making a profound point, but it was a matter of language. I don't think it was that Winry didn't forgive Scar. I think that she was pushing back against the modern bastardization of forgiveness, where Scar is like, wait a minute, you forgave me? And Winry goes, no, and I don't have to forgive you. Well, no. The victim of somebody who is abused doesn't need to say, hey, what you did is okay. I'm okay with you now. We're going to be best friends. But they do need to be able to accept, and this is what forgiveness means, I think. They do need to be able to accept that what happened happened, and that you aren't necessarily, and that's not going to rule your life, and that this person isn't just what they did that one time. And Winry is able to do that. She's able to accept that Scar is more than one mistake that he made, when he was in a rage that one time. So,
Yeah,
I
I'd have
think
to
that
agree
Full
with you.
Metal Alchemist. I think the point that Full Metal Alchemist was making was correct, ultimately. But I do think it was not working with Christian language or a Christian worldview when it was making that point. So it ends up feeling kind of muddled, at least to me. If it were me writing that whole sequence, I would have phrased it as Winry did forgive him, but that didn't mean that she was just okay with what he did. I would have made that distinction, as opposed to making a distinction between, oh, I'll work with you, but I won't forgive you, when for all intents and purposes, what she did was forgive him.
Go ahead, Caroline.
No, yeah, I'd have to agree with Anthony there, because the phraseology, it's been a little while. I think she said something along the lines of, I don't forgive your wanton murdering. And I do think she did say before she got to that, she said something along the lines of, I don't forgive you and I don't have to forgive you, which is, yeah, for all intents and purposes, she actually does. And it probably could have been better if they'd said it.
Right.
Even so, I also think that the fact that she did it, sometimes actions speak louder than words. So the fact that it's done, in a way, it's done too in SG1. They don't necessarily trust Teal'c all at once, and they do have to learn to get to know him. But after a little while, it's like he was always there. We trust him. You want to hurt him and punish him for what he did under Apophis? You got to answer to us, because he's family now. And after a point, the rest of the team in Full Metal Alchemist treats Scar the same way. He's one of us. Yes, he did these bad things, and no, we're not gonna be nice to him and say that's okay. It's not okay. But we forgive him, and we can work with him. And that actually, hang on, I gotta pull that one back out of the files in my head. That actually ties into something, the entire Endeavor arc. I've been watching this very closely, especially now. And I haven't seen WandaVision, but I know the story it's based off of. And I didn't read it, but it was part of the start of a pattern where you would have heroes fly off the handle for less reason than Wanda does in the comics and in the TV show. And they would do very horrible things. Not under mind control necessarily. Like, there were certain instances where, okay, the hero gets mind controlled. He's not responsible for what he did under mind control, like Hawkeye in the first movie, which is something that Natasha has to drill home to him and said, no, you're not responsible. You didn't do this. This was this guy pulling your strings. when it's not somebody pulling your strings, when you snap like Wanda has, a lot of modern comic book writers treat it as a chance for very painful, nerve-grinding soap opera where you have former friends backbiting and hurting each other for something that they did. They won't forgive. In fact, there was a comic storyline a few years ago, 2015-ish. That was when I stopped paying attention to Marvel Comics. I couldn't stand it anymore. Where Cap tried to get a unity squad going between the X-Men and the Avengers, and the X-Men verbally stabbed at Wanda every chance they got because of what she did in Disassembled when she rewrote reality and then wrote most mutant powers out of it when she reverted everything to normal.
They should have blamed the editors.
That was House of M.
Oh, that was House of M. I kind of they flowed into each other, so I kind of refer to it as Disassembled anyway.
Okay.
Although you're right, it was House of M when we got the whole rewrite of the universe. But they don't forgive, and what Horikoshi has done with Endeavor is he said, no, there's a reason that other good guys have to forgive. Shoto has to forgive, just like and along with the rest of his family, otherwise they can't move on and live a healthy life. Endeavor has to accept what he's done, acknowledge it, seek to repair the damage as best as he's able, and then forgive himself. And they didn't. This is one of the things that drove me crazy about modern American comics is they won't do that. They won't go in large part, they want to drum up all the drama for this type of storytelling where they won't forgive. And it's not healthy.
Right. Well, because it's nobody's fault either.
Yeah.
I mean, if Wanda had a mental break, can you really blame Wanda? She had a mental breakdown. Whereas you get Scar in Full Metal Alchemist, who very clearly is also having a mental breakdown in that moment. But because, Hiramu Arakawa is not a hack and understands human psychology, she makes sure that Scar recognizes that he did something horrible in that moment, and he never tries to make an excuse for it. In fact, Winry actually asks him, essentially, so what's your excuse? Why did you do it? And Scar straight up says, there's nothing that I could tell you that will sound like a good excuse.
Yeah, and that's something too, because Wanda had a reason, but for other storylines, there was, again, this was one of the things I just gave up because I couldn't stand it anymore. They had Bruce Banner start to lose his mind for no real reason. I mean, the guy's been through the ringer a lot of times, and yet they still have him starting to go off the line. So they have Hawkeye kill him. And then he goes off in the sunset, to atone or whatever. And it's like, okay, first of all, they're old friends. Pulling the trigger shouldn't have been that easy, even for Hawkeye. And I'm sorry, having him ride off into the sunset to go cry in a hole somewhere? Now that's man pain if you want to use the SJW thing, because that's just stupid. It's stupid that he would pull the trigger that easily and not look for an alternative, while other people were looking for an alternative and trying to talk Bruce down and make sense out of it. And all it does is lead to more and more pointless, unhealthy choices on the part of not only Hawkeye and Bruce and other characters, but the whole universe starts. This is why Marvel's comics are tanking. The whole universe is mired in an unhealthy mindset. So this is another reason why I really like watching the Endeavor arc and how he's doing it. And I'm taking notes on the side, like, okay, I gotta remember that this is one of the ways you can do this, because Marvel and DC have stopped doing this. They keep going further and further into degenerate things and saying, well, there's essentially no such thing as heroism because at base, the heroes and the villains, there's no difference, which is something that even when you have certain characters in My Hero Academia make that kind of a speech, it doesn't add up because you have Deku, you have Bakugo, you have Shoto, you have Ochako, you have all these other kids, and several of their mentors find ways around it. Ray is finding a way around it in a similar storyline with much less reason in many ways. Hawkeye and Mockingbird in the comics got divorced because she killed a guy who took advantage of her sexually. And Hawkeye wasn't there. It was a time travel story. She got stuck in one time, and he got sent further along with the rest of the team, so he wasn't there. But she went and took revenge, and then she didn't tell him about it. So he ended up being told about it later on, and this eventually led to a divorce and a lot of other nastiness down there. And it's just been a cycle of this throughout modern American comics in all the big names, where they just go and they do all these things. Now, to a degree, you can understand why she wouldn't talk about it. It's painful. He wasn't there when he should have been, even though circumstances ripped him out of the situation. And he was so shocked and horrified that he couldn't. They needed time to work it out, but the comic writers didn't give it to them. And Horikoshi's doing that with Ray and Endeavor, where she comes in and says, yeah, you were horrible. Get your act together. Where they're actually having dialogue and talking. Nobody really talks anymore in the comics. In the older comics, you would have these respites. You would have a good option. I don't know if you follow him, but there was, and I can't remember his name. I know I saved the video. But he was talking about the Marvel comic which introduced Rogue. And after she'd absorbed Carol Danvers' powers. And Carol Danvers comes back later in the same issue. And she gives the Avengers a tongue lashing because she was abducted by someone who took sexual advantage of her. And there were some extra details, which I won't go into now. And the team did nothing. They thought she was under the influence, so she couldn't say to them, I need help. This guy is taking advantage of me, and he's going to take me away and do even worse. But she couldn't break that spell. She's one of the Marvel characters who can't fight mental influences very well without help. And she gives them all a tongue lashing for treating it like, oh, they're engaged, they're going to go get married. You don't get that in modern comics anymore. You get a lot of yelling and screaming and I'm the victim, and a bunch of other unhealthy stuff. This is one of the reasons why I love My Hero Academia. They sit down and they talk and they deal with this stuff in an exotic way, like most Japanese anime, which also follows this type of pattern. My Hero Academia is just doing it in a very nuanced, interesting manner. So that's one of the reasons why the Endeavor arc is so interesting, where we're mired in a comic book sea which is very unhealthy. So to have a healthy mindset in a different comic book, even one from an exotic place like Japan, it gets people's attention. And that's one of the reasons why there are people trying to shoot it down.
It's also very satanic. The idea that, you can't, forgive or something like that is something the devil himself would like for everyone to live through, because it keeps them mired. It keeps them stuck in things that is not healthy, will never be healthy. But hey, at least you got your bad feelings. Don't you worry.
Right. That's the whole thing with the backlash of the Endeavor arc. While I sort of kind of get what people are saying with, their whole objection to Deku's comments, the fact of the matter is that Deku is also not wrong about what he says. The idea that I think this is also something that's very modern. The idea that there is no moral obligation on the parts of victims is absolutely false. It has historically never been the case. In fact, you could say that is exactly what Christ is counseling against when he says that you need to forgive your persecutors not just 7 times, but 70 times 7. He is not addressing that to the person committing the sin. He is addressing that to the person who is being sinned against. And he is saying that you have an obligation, that you are supposed to do this, and if you don't, you're doing something wrong. So the modern mentality where if you are a victim, you are suddenly blameless is simply incorrect in that sense as well. Now, what My Hero Academia, I think, honestly speaking, the more it's gone on, the more that you look at it, it's really a story about I think that it could be summed up as a story about the cycle of abuse through generations. I mean, going all the way to the central relationships of the story. Deku is abused by Bakugo, but Deku is somebody who doesn't have a, you know, he doesn't have a mean bone in his body. He can't hold it against Bakugo, and he actually needs to learn how to do that and to take those sorts of insults as insults. Because in being a doormat, it's made him so dangerously self-destructive that he puts himself on the brink of death nearly every battle with no regard for his own life because of how much Bakugo has hurt his self-worth. Bakugo, meanwhile, undergoes his own redemption arc, but faster than Endeavor's. He sees what Deku is doing. I'm sure he understands on some level that he had a role to play in how Deku got this way, and he sacrifices his own body in an attempt to make up for it. And in a sense, he does make up for it because both him and Deku are alive right now, but because of what he did.
Yep.
And you get the same thing with Endeavor and Shoto. It's also abuse. Now, Deku manages to stay sane because Deku has a mother who loves him, but Horikoshi is a good writer, but he is not a subtle writer. And he is very explicit in the fact that Deku badly lacked a father figure. And All Might is very much filling that role now.
Yep.
So the thing about everybody talking about, oh, who's Deku's father going to be? It's one of the weirder mysteries of My Hero Academia. The reason it's one of the weirder mysteries is that with most of the mysteries that people talk about, who was the traitor, when is XY or Shigaraki's only at 70%, what's 100% going to be, like, who was the traitor, the identity of Dabi. All of these were things that Horikoshi was dropping hints for, even if he was even if he was dripping them very, very slowly. The Deku father thing that fans will sometimes talk about is a really strange one because Horikoshi does not talk about it or reference it at all. Like, it's bizarre. Deku's father basically doesn't exist. He's not referenced, he's not hinted at, he's not talked about. I don't think that the Deku ever says the word father at any point. Inko never brings him up.
Mm-hmm.
It's not even like it's weird because it's not even like he's dead or like he's left.
On
it's
business.
Like he just doesn't exist. Yeah, it's like he doesn't even exist. Like Deku always only ever had a mother, and that's just how it was. And nobody finds this unusual. It's very weird.
Yep.
Yeah,
it's like
kind
a
of
Japanese
like
trope, I think.
After a point, yeah, they just seem to have that a little bit more than we do in some ways.
One of the things that come up often is sort of like generation cycles, generations of abuse, that sort of thing. You can look at it in a bunch of different ways, but the real sort of meat of the issue is whether or not the abuse is going to continue with the events that have played out. Will they make the right choice or will they make, the evil choice again? Shigaraki has the choice to be good. I know from my own family, because, I've taken the Endeavor story arc very personally. I'm the first one in generations to not be alcoholic, but my dad is the one who fought the battle. The anger from my family, you can trace it down the male line, and I've traced it as far as my great grandfather, who abused my father and then gave the money he earned to his older brother. My mother's side of the family, my grandmother loved me to death. Just saying. Uh, but she was very verbally abusive to her children and her husband, to the point where my grandfather, who was one of the meekest men I've ever met, nearly hit her. Like, just straight up lifted, like, got real quiet, lifted his hand, then went for a walk. And everyone's like, oh my goodness, she just destroyed the family. But he came back because he was a good man. But her mother was sent to an insane asylum, a Victorian insane asylum. I have no idea what horrors she beheld there, and that passed on incredible amounts of fear and mental anguish to her daughter, which caused incredible fear and mental anguish to the point where my mother is the only one of her siblings who has a healthy, quote unquote, relationship with, a significant other, and then it's like me, and it's like all this stuff, all these generations. Is Shoto going to be the hero? Am I going to say there's going to be new sins in the family? Because I'm tired of all this madness and anger. Can he forgive Endeavor? Can he prove himself greater than Dabi? Can he make these choices that make him a great character? He's being pushed on and on and on. And of course, Horikoshi seems to like a happy ending, so maybe there will be a happy ending. But there doesn't have to be. It's still in play. All these different things that we're seeing, that we're talking about, that are worth talking about, because they are so well written, so inspired, that they can be like, isekai is the worst sort of thing that you can transport into your own life. Escape fantasy, power fantasies, lowest form, dog tier, base of the pyramid. But then there's high things like Endeavor, forgiveness, family, being a man, taking care of the evils of ambition, but at the same time, the good that can come from ambition. It's one of those things that honestly make My Hero Academia worth reading.
So, the Hawk storyline is another interesting one, and it's another, like, if you weren't sure that this was a story about abuse before you read Hawk's full backstory, now you know, kind of, because that was yet another story where he had an abusive father, and really an abusive mother, too, just not as
Neglectful.
abusive, and in a different way.
Yeah.
Yeah, in a different way. Neglectful. So, the Hawk storyline is interesting because all indications with Hawks point to his story being a tragedy. And they are making a lot of Icarus references as well. Probably, and I do think that it's true that what's going to happen is he's going to try and confront Dabi himself. And he's going to try and kill Dabi, and they're going to have to try and stop him from doing that. Somehow. And all signs point to it being a tragic story. However, I think that Tokiyami has played a large enough role both in My Hero Academia's larger narrative and in Hawks' story that he's a big enough character now that he's going to have something to say there. And I think that Tokiyami's role in the story as part of that newer generation is going to have a say in whether or not it's going to be a happy ending. It may be like a tragically happy ending in that, Hawks dies, but he dies a good death.
Yep.
But without Tokiyami, I do think that the story would be heading towards a tragic ending. But I do think that Tokiyami is important enough to the overall narrative and to Hawks' narrative that he may change the direction of that story, and how it ends up, and he may have an influence on it. JD Cohen, who, by the way, hi JD, says that ironically Hawks' father figure is Endeavor. Yeah, actually, I mean, Endeavor is who Hawks idolized growing up. Although it's a weird relationship because at the same time, while that is true, it's also true that I never got the impression that Hawks was entirely ignorant of who Endeavor was, if that makes sense. Like, he was horrified by the Dobby reveal, like everybody else was, of course, because that's a level of extreme that you can't really expect, you know.
Right.
But on the other side, like, just going by his interactions in the Endeavor versus High End fight and his interactions with Endeavor, I always got the impression that Hawks kind of knew that Endeavor was not a great human being. So it's an interesting form of idolization, and it does though hint towards Hawks heading towards a tragic ending that maybe Tokiyami could prevent
And I do
if
want to
Tokiyami.
keep going.
Go ahead.
Uh,
No, you're
okay.
good.
So like, and I do want to say things here. Like, even though I'm kind of airing out some dirty laundry because it's directly connected to the story arc, you know, Endeavor's still a hero. My dad still preached the gospel. He instilled in me a love of Christ that'll never break. I've seen miracles. I've seen crazy things that I've talked about in this thing before. People have healed. People have died. Like brave men have gone to their knees because they heard a voice that says, "If you harm this man, I'll kill you." Just when they were hired to throw my dad off the pulpit. Like all these different things I've seen. The goodness of a character, even though Endeavor was very abusive, he is still a man who put his life on the line to save the people of the city when Hood came calling. He's put his
Endeavor ultimately. This is why they mentioned, like, I don't know if there is a good side to Endeavor. There was always a good side to Endeavor because Endeavor did not have to be a hero. He could have devoted himself to being number one in anything in the world. And I know you could say, well, it's because he wanted the love and adulation of the people. But even that, it's like, well, yes, that's true. But on the other hand, so what?
Well, what about his
Like,
family? Like, that argument falls apart because people who want love and adulation, that includes their family. It's part of their character flaws.
He wants to be number one. So Endeavor could have chosen to be number one at anything. But he chose an incredibly high risk profession that involved saving other people. So one thing that I really hope they do in the Endeavor arc is, like, I'd really like to know this. Why? Like, legitimately, why did Endeavor decide, I'm not just gonna be number one, doctor. I'm not just gonna be the number one lawyer. I am going to be the number one hero specifically, with all of the danger that entails. Because there must be something, right? There's got to be something in Endeavor that made him say, I choose to be a hero. And that's the other thing when people go, there's no difference between the heroes and the villains or whatever.
What?
Like, you can't take that, I mean, I don't see it, but like when people talk about the comparisons between the two, the one thing that you need to remember with those comparisons is that even the worst heroes are putting their lives on the line to save other people. That was the whole point of Can't You See Kun in the Endeavor High End fight. As he tells them, "Can't you see? Can't you see that he's fighting for us right now? Can't you see that he's out there, and you have the gall to complain about All Might not being here when Endeavor is here right now, still fighting." Which was one of the great moments of the manga, I think. In my opinion, that was one of the best scenes of the anime as well. That was one of those chill-inducing moments. Then the freaking English dub of the anime sort of ruins it because so that fight, I'm gonna take a moment to bitch slightly about the English dub because I actually think the English dub of My Hero Academia, like 9 times out of 10, is really pretty great. But there's this moment at the end of the Endeavor High End fight, which is probably my second favorite fight in the entire show. It's fantastic. Just A tier in animation, writing, all of it. So Endeavor falls to the ground as this flaming inferno on top of the Nomu, and he lands on the ground, and there's this hush as everybody waits for the smoke to clear. to see what they're going to see on the other end, and everyone's silent. And in Japanese, you get this amazing line read where the reporter who's watching goes, "Endeavor standing." And it's just such a great read because you could really hear, like, this is a man who should be dead. Like, we have just witnessed the impossible, and he is standing in front of us. And the dub just kills it. It's so lame. she she just like, Endeavor is standing. I'm like, really? That's what you're gonna give me? That's your moment? Like, this is a man who you just saw burst into flames and fall from the sky, and he's standing in front of you. And that's what you're gonna give me in terms of your excitement level at this. Like, come on. I don't know. That's my little that's my little bitch. JD Cohen says there are people who want Hawks to die because he killed twice. Yeah, that's dumb. Twice was a maniac, and also twice had to be stopped. Anyway, Caroline, go ahead.
It's interesting that you say that one of the main themes of My Hero Academia is breaking the cycle of abuse. It's not necessarily as obvious in in the top tier of DC Comics, but Marvel Comics deals, and if I remember right, Horikoshi is a huge Marvel fan.
Yeah, he is.
Marvel Comics deals with a lot of characters who've been abused in one way or another throughout their lives, and three particular My Hero Academia characters reflect a little bit on this, and I'm going to use some other Western heroes to explain how. For Deku, his abuse mirrors, in many ways, his character mirrors Spider-Man. He's got a loving mother figure, Aunt May, Inko, Midoriya, but no father figure. In Peter Parker's case, Uncle Ben was killed. And in Midoriya's case, well, he idolized this version of Captain America and Superman. But he was abused by someone who he was close to when he was young. In this way, back goes similar to Flash Thompson. And the whole thing with Peter Parker is, with great power comes great responsibility. He can beat Flash Thompson anytime he wants, but he hides his power and he doesn't. Midoriya does the same thing with Bakugo. Not in the sense that he hides what he can do so much as he hides how he got it until Bakugo figures it out. Shoto very much, to my mind, resembles Hawkeye. In the original comics, Hawkeye's father was very abusive. He abused him, and he abused his older brother, and he abused his wife, until he got drunk and, when they were driving home, wrapped the car around the tree, killed himself and his wife. Hawkeye ended up as a roustabout in a circus where he was taken on as an apprentice to the swordsman and trickshot, an archer. And he would do archery to boost the act for the swordsman, until the swordsman revealed that, oh, hey, I'm a thief and I just stole from the circus, and you're telling the circus, no, you're not. And he chases him into the middle of the big top and cuts the tripwire. Hawkeye breaks his legs, and then his brother walks out on him because he idolized the swordsman and wanted to be his apprentice, and no, I got passed over for you, and you went and walked out on him, so I'm going to walk out on you. And he ends up being more or less raised by Trickshot until he accidentally falls in with the Black Widow, who was not on the good side, on the side of the Angels at the time. That happened later. And eventually Hawkeye makes his way to the Avengers, where he becomes a hero. And the other type of abuse that's reflected on in My Hero Academia is the abuse that life hands you. This would be, I think, encapsulated well by Aizawa, who has always reminded me much more so than Endeavor, of Batman. Guy sleeps all day, is more alert at night, relies on logic and reason and has.
He is Batman, but it's I was using Endeavor as a example of a number two hero more than anything else.
Yeah, but again, in Batman's case, he was not physically abused. His parents were wonderful. Now, they died when he was 8, so maybe his memory's not the greatest, but we kind of inculcate, even up to that age, exactly how our parents treat us, and by all accounts, his parents were wonderful. Life handed him what Gambit called a busted bluff. His parents were killed right in front of him. Aizawa lost his best friend in high school, and it's been one hit after another after another after another, and yet he keeps getting up and keeps going. He's not a drunkard. He's not he doesn't abuse his students. He puts them through hell, but life is going to put them through hell, and he knows that personally. So again, you have these are all tropes that were developed in Western comics, and I can't say that they've never been used in Japan. To a degree, they've been widely adopted all over the world because stories are universal. But where modern comics have devolved into, there's no escape from abuse. Doesn't matter what side you're on, it's always going to come.
Yep.
My Hero Academia is saying, no, there is an escape from abuse. You can choose this, and you can be a hero too, which is Deku's whole thing. Yes, you can be a hero.
People have a choice to make often when it comes to, abuse and anger and stuff like that. And that's whether or not you're going to let it control your life. The answer that we get from Marvel Comics and other places is, yeah, I'll let it control my life, I don't care. But in reality, that doesn't make you a better person. In fact, it makes you weaker.
Yeah, and actually, I think it was about the 80s. Up until the 80s, Marvel was going with, no, it makes you a better person. You don't have to stick with this. It's only since at least the 90s and possibly the late 80s where it's gone into this death spiral, which is really, really sad because the comics were very hopeful, were very bright, and they've been, well, poisoned. DC as well, but in a different way.
Yeah. Satan could be forgiven at any time, but he chooses to remain in rebellion to God. Just like we are forgiven by the blood of Christ. Now, it doesn't mean there's no consequences. I have no idea. That's between, God and Satan. But it's like he could say, okay, that's it. I'm not in rebellion. I'm not going to do it. And mean it. Like we say, we accept the blood of Christ. That's all we need for the forgiveness of sins. Whatever we do after is for the love of Christ. And I'm sure that there's some argument out there, well, James says this or James says that. Well, there's no forgiveness without the blood of Christ. I'll witch test myself. Christ died on the cross for our sins and was risen again the third day. He was the Son of God. All that good stuff. It's true. It's utterly true. And it is entirely the central tenet for why we should forgive and why it is better for us to forgive than it is for us to hate. There's a joke that, oh man, I wish I had that ancient Roman energy where I could keep up this murderous rage. Not really rage, but, this murder desire for 6 months as I walk across Gaul. The ancient world was as hurt by bitterness and hatred as it was hurt by its pagan philosophies and its good night, Chris. And its horrible choices. You could stay a small angry child forever, or you could grow into being a real man, a real woman. And part of that is just abandoning it, forgiving it. Looks like the fans need to forgive twice. Or Hawks,
Yeah,
rather.
well. So, Twice was a mass murderer, and he was also the most powerful member of the League of Villains and could literally almost double their power single-handedly. So, he had to die.
Caroline, you were about to
Just
say
gonna
something.
throw that out there.
Yeah, and that's something else that My Hero Academia comes into, because we have the heroes, I will not kill. Sometimes the heroes don't leave you a choice. Hawks did try to talk him down. He gave him opportunity after opportunity. He said, look, you don't have to do this. He even saved his life when Dobby almost killed him. You don't have to do this. You can make the choice. And Twice made his choice. And Hawks didn't have any other options.
Oh, Hawks was a hero. He was definitely a hero, I think. Anyway, yeah,
Absolutely.
and I'm sure that you guys agree with me. But that was the thing. There was the whole one of those things was that we don't know if Best Jeanist is alive or not. So I was sure that Best Jeanist was alive for the majority of the time, and the reason that I was sure of it was honestly from a writing perspective, in that there was no reason not to tell us if Best Jeanist was alive or not if Best Jeanist was dead. It would be more dramatic if they revealed earlier in the story that Hawks had killed Best Jeanist than leaving it ambiguous. If they were leaving it ambiguous, then the only reason that they could have for that would have to be that Best Jeanist was still alive.
Mm-hmm.
So that was why I was just kind of waiting for the when, not if, he showed up. And it was also just the fact of it kind of told you what sort of person was Hawks. Like, was he a good person or a bad person? Because if he killed Best Jeanist, it's really hard to be on his side. And for as much as I respect Horikoshi and some of the bolder decisions he makes, he is not that type of writer who would try and make you side with an actual murderer. I don't like just straight up say, this guy is one of the good guys and he outright kills a hero to keep his cover. That would be a little bit extreme. And I think he had a hard job with Hawks too. In the war arc, Hawks needed to do something really big during the war arc that justified all of the subterfuge and the undercover stuff, which is why I think he had to kill Hawks. Because if Hawks didn't do something really big as a result of the fact that he was able to get in with that deep cover, then it would have made the whole thing seem kind of pointless. So the really big thing, killing Twice. So the really big thing that he did was kill Twice. And I mean, Twice was the most powerful of the League of Villains. And not only was he the most powerful, he was honestly, like, the most powerful by far. Like, he had all of the powers of everybody else, except he could, like, double them and then double them again exponentially. So he really, really had to go as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
That's it. That's all I got.
I think I'm running out of gas myself.
Hey, no problem. It's a very enjoyable and whatnot. It's always a pleasure to have you on. Got any final words for us?
Plus Ultra.
Outstanding. Anthony?
I don't think I could top that.
Fair. It is your Christian duty to forgive. And it will make you a better person to forgive without asking for anything in return. Because ultimately, if you can't forgive, you cannot appreciate the real character arcs the people you should forgive are going through. Because they're a character too. And as much as the SJWs are crazy about their narration BS, I'd rather have a satisfactory story arc and be told at the end of my life, well done, you passed the tests, than to say, dude, like, all you had to do was say, I forgive you. Well, Let's see here. Horikoshi doesn't lean on the Batman crutch. Absolutely. All right. Thank you guys for joining me. Thank you, Miss Furlong. And I hope I can socially pressure you into writing an episode of Pink